started. So welcome everyone. I hope you're doing well. It's so exciting to see you all. It's amazing to think that this is the last of the summer 2022 Alumni Webinar series. And you can see here that our topic is on entity level climate action. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen because we don't need to see that. We all know that's there. It's so wonderful to see all of your faces. So we'll soon have all of the recordings of all the alumni webinars up on our YouTube channel. I'll post a LinkedIn when that takes place. So if you missed from the last ones, definitely try to catch those recordings. And I believe we only have our fellows on with us today, but just in case if people are joining us who aren't one of our fellows, as we did advertise this to our LinkedIn group as well, I want to introduce myself. My name is Alexis Dwyer. I am the Program and Network Stewardship Coordinator at the UNH Sustainability Institute, and I'm delighted to have you all joining us today. The webinar series really is a key program element of our Sustainability Fellowship, which is a paid summer program that connects high-achieving undergraduate and post-baccalaureate students with organizations to work on high-impact sustainability initiatives. Our goal for this webinar series is to provide valuable insight into the field of sustainability for our current fellows, help them build their professional networks, and connect with program alumni, ultimately helping them navigate their career options. So without further ado, I'd like to announce our moderator for this session, Jennifer Andrews, the Sustainability Program Director at the UNH Sustainability Institute. Jen Andrews is a program director where for the past 9 years, she has led a range of sustainability programs, including UNH's sustainability reporting to HU STARS and the climate commitment, its SciMap initiative to support organizations in tracking and reducing their carbon and nitrogen footprints, and the Sustainability Fellows Program. Before coming to the Institute, Jen spent 13 years at the nonprofit Clean Air, Cool Planet, promoting and supporting practical climate solutions for colleges, universities, as well as municipalities and businesses. She holds a BA in English and an MA in mental health counseling, both from UNH. So take it away, Jen.
Thank you, Alexis, and thank you all for being patient and hearing my intro again, hopefully stage setting. I am so excited to be here with you all today for so many reasons. And the first, of course, is that, as you may have already gathered, I am excited about entity level climate action, which is a fancy way of saying what businesses and campuses and local governments and organizations and individuals can do to lead the way to a low carbon society and economy. And the idea that their individual leadership and innovation in managing their carbon footprints and planning for resilience and engaging their stakeholders, all of those things can spur and shape new policies and markets to support decarbonization, and also spur and shape new norms and beliefs and behaviors upon which a more sustainable future can rest. And so how many of you saw the announcement last night about the potential new legislation, which could put the US on a pathway to 40% reductions over the next decade? To me, that makes me feel like, oh, this belief and the power of individual leadership is bearing fruit. I know that that legislation is a product of, policy work and advocacy and a lot of expertise on that front, but I also know it's a product of all the individual leadership in communities across the US and the world, and the individuals doing that work that make it seem possible, that make it seem important, that have made it sort of economically viable, that have created the demand for that kind of legislation. And so today I'm cautiously optimistic that with the US stepping up, we have more hope for the global effort to limit warming to something close to the Paris Agreement targets. And the cherry on top of that announcement for me was that one of the ways that I received that announcement was in an email thread from a former fellow, an alum of our climate fellowship program named Tim Ryder, who works in Senator Schumer's office. He was a speaker in our series last summer, and so you all could go back and find the video of him talking about his journey on our YouTube channel, and hopefully we'll bring him back sometime soon. But he did a summer fellowship back in 2012 working with me on a food carbon footprint tool that we were calling chefs, that was used by institutions to manage their footprints. And the work that he did in that kind of context and the work that our panelists that you're going to hear from do, again, I have real belief that all that work has helped set the stage and move us forward for progress. So I am excited finally for the chance to reconnect with and hear from our three amazing panelists who've also been part of that movement. And I'm excited for you all to hear from them. So I've had the privilege of working with and supporting all three of these leaders, first in their sustainability fellowships, and then subsequently as they work to mentor other fellows in this and in other programs that they've been a part of, and more generally in their work as leaders and champions in their respective organizations. So I know you're going to love hearing from them. And so without further ado, I will introduce them to you and we'll get to it. So first of all, Andrea Webster is the Resilience Policy Advisor for the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency. So she works across state agencies and with local governments to increase community resilience to the impacts of natural hazards and climate change. She also serves on the board of the GEOS Institute, GEOS, which you all should check out. And before that, she worked at Indiana University's Environmental Resilience Institute, where she supported Indiana mayors and county officials and their staff on local climate action. And while she was there, she co-authored the Andrea, help me, Hoosier Resilience Index. I don't know why I was having a hard time saying that, which outlines the tangible steps that local governments can take to manage their climate impacts. And before that, from 2013 to 2017, she worked for Louisville, Kentucky Metro Government's Office of Sustainability, where she implemented carbon reduction projects. And before that, she did a summer climate fellowship working for the city of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And across all of these positions, Andrea's focused on reducing greenhouse gases in the public and private sectors, helping communities access and understand climate projection data, and breaking down barriers to climate action. And so she holds an undergraduate degree from Indiana University in Bloomington, a Master of Public Administration from the Maxwell School at Syracuse, and a Master of Science and Environmental Studies from SUNY ESF. So she's very learned and very experienced, and we're excited to hear from her today. Thank you, Andrea. Next, we have Matt LaRue, who is the Campus Energy Manager at UNH. And as the Campus Energy Manager, Matt serves as the Principal Advocate for energy conservation and utilization for our Durham campus. He's currently a lead accredited professional for building design and construction and a Building Performance Institute certified building analyst professional. And before taking on his current role at UNH, he worked as an energy efficiency manager at the Resilient Buildings Group, where Madeline is this summer. He was also a sustainability fellow in 2017. He worked with me and Dr. Wake and staff across UNH and Durham on a resilience assessment and plan for the campus and community. He also worked for the Sustainability Institute as a STARS intern, and he graduated from UNH with a dual Bachelor's of Science in Environmental and Resource Economics and our sustainability dual major. He was one of our first sustainability dual majors. So we're just a little proud to claim Matt in our network. And he has experience with estimating, project management, energy analysis, utility incentives, stakeholder outreach, and building analysis. We want to connect with Matt. Finally, David Larson. David is a recent graduate of Amherst College, where he double majored in environmental studies and English. He completed a sustainability fellowship in the summer of 2020, where for Unitil, where he focused on researching and implementing company-level sustainability projects. And his work and contributions were so valuable that they kept him on part-time while he was finishing his degree and then brought him on full-time. So since starting full-time with Unitil as a sustainability impact analyst and moving north to the Boston area in February, Dave has been focusing on preparing and improving Unitil's third annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory and supporting the submissions of Unitil's annual third-party environmental disclosures. David is passionate about effective communication through writing and speaking, qualities which he tries to constantly bring to his role as an analyst. And outside of work, he enjoys anything that involves the mountains and hiking boots, which here. So I hope you all are now as excited to hear from our panelists as I am. And I'm going to start off, we're going to do this round robin, just as in the last sessions. And Andrea, maybe I'll go to you first and ask you just to say a little bit more about how your current work fits under this broad banner of what we're calling entity level climate action. So a little bit more about what it entails.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. It's so great to be here with you all, and thanks for the invitation. I'm a huge fan of the UNH program. I've been a student there. I've hosted a student, and now I'm advising a group of students. So I hope you all can tell how much I love this program. I mean, I think in terms of the entity level climate action, this is my day-to-day, and it's been my day-to-day since the UNH program, thanks to the program. So, and I love it so much. I think on a day-to-day, what it means for me is, in my current position with the state of North Carolina, is that I'm helping communities address climate change impacts. Right now, we're working on a project where we're working with communities to work together regionally. So we have 9 regions in the eastern half of the state, which is this half the state that gets hit really hard with hurricanes, although the entire state gets hit pretty hard. So we're trying to work with communities to work together across counties, more or less aligned with watersheds, because what we realize is that climate change and hurricanes and other storms don't just hit one individual community, they hit a region. And so we're trying to help those regions plan together for the impacts of climate change to try to alleviate the burdens. Apart from that, I'm also leading and designing the construction of a state level website to support climate leaders and community leaders in North Carolina. The site will aggregate climate resilience resources. You've probably seen these sites nationally, ArcX, CAKE. I know there's the Georgetown Climate Center, but having one at the state level, I think has been really needed to pull together state level resources. And, you know, especially in smaller towns, you know, these communities are not, they're not paying attention, and they're not climate scientists, they're not climate, you know, they're not working in the climate field, so they're just not aware of what's available nationally. And so if we can give them something that's specific to the state, then they're much more likely to take advantage of what those resources are. And then next, I think the other entity level work that I do is working with all state government agencies to help them understand what they can do to address climate change within their work. So it's not just coming out of the Department of Environmental Quality, it's not just coming out of the Emergency Management Department, it's coming out of the Department of Transportation and even the Department of Commerce. And so, you know, it's helping educate those folks on what they can do, because it doesn't have to all be me and my organization. It really needs to be everyone. And then of course, there's a lot of policy work that's sprinkled throughout all of that.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. I can't wait to dig into that a little bit more. It sounds like, you know, you're a little busy. You have a few things keeping your attention going.
Yeah, I prefer it that way. Yeah.
Right on. David, how about you next? Tell us about how your work with Unitil kind of fits into this frame.
Sure. Yeah. I think, as you said, Jen, the way I would describe my job as an analyst right now is researching, supporting, implementing projects that are focused on reducing our sort of company-wide environmental impact. And the way that I understand that most frequently is through the framework of emissions and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions across the 3 scopes. I know that all of our fellows that are working on greenhouse gas inventories this summer know that it's a wonderful tool to sort of consolidate a variety of activities and consumption that companies undertake. And so I understand my climate action, or how my work fits under the climate action framework as a process of reducing those emissions, meeting our carbon targets as a company, which were set last year, as we are sort of just beginning our journey of recording, reducing, documenting our emissions. And so for progress, we're reporting against those targets. And for the actual action, there's a variety of programs which I would be happy to get into if we have some more time later, that we're putting into action to reduce those emissions. And then the other, I think, important and more relevant right now thing that I am focusing on is our third-party disclosures for environmental reporting. So that is as I'm learning, is a huge process of pulling lots of information from many different sort of sectors of the company together to, paint a much more comprehensive picture of how we are, addressing climate change, planning for climate change from a financial perspective, from a resilience perspective. We have, tons of on the ground infrastructure that will be affected by sea level rise, like Katia is working on this summer with us. Will be affected by greater frequency of storms, of all of the wonderful effects of climate change that we are, expecting in the next 100 years and beyond. And so those reporting on that, that planning is also a big part of what I do and what I support in my job. And it's great to be back. It's so fun to see everyone and to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you again for being here. And yeah, I'm going to put in a plea for folks to turn on your cameras when you can, just so we can actually see you, especially when we get into the broader Q&A. And Dave, sounds like it's really cool to see some of the work that you started doing as a fellow kind of carried through to planning and implementation now in terms of climate action planning. It sounds like a lot of the themes you're working on are around kind of transparency as well as planning with the data.
Totally. Yeah. Better reporting. And it's very fun to have, completed this project initially and have it be a major part of planning in the future. I think it speaks to how meaningful these projects can actually be for organizations after they're done. And it certainly was true in my case. So
So awesome. Thank you. So Matt, I'm going to turn to you with the same question. Give us a sense of how this fits. And then, you know what? I'm going to ask you the next question and we'll kind of go back up in reverse. So I'll give you two. How does this fit? And then why do you do it? What got you into it, or what keeps you into it? You can tell that as a sort of origin story or as a what's sustaining you in it, however you want to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So like Andrea, I'm a big fan of this program. I've been fortunate enough to be able to participate pretty much since I've graduated from it. And I just really like the outreach and the opportunity that it provides you fellows. So my role at UNH consists of primary 4 main parts. So fuel procurement, which ranges from everything from oil and propane in our off-campus buildings to natural gas, electricity, renewable landfill gas, pretty much everything we use on campus. From there, it's my role to coordinate what we use in our central plant. So our central plant uses oil, natural gas, and renewable landfill gas. And we have a range of assets that burn this. So from big boilers to gas turbines, to generators up at our landfill. So telling the operators what we should be burning on a given day based on what fuel prices are, what the carbon impacts are going to be. Trying to make the best decision there. And then when we get sort of downstream from the bigger picture, I'm responsible for tracking all of the energy use on campus. So our core campus has 1 electric meter coming into it and a few large gas meters. And so all of our buildings from there are sub-metered. So we have to track that to sort of know what buildings are using what. That helps inform us on energy efficiency decisions, on operating protocols and things like that. And then finally is the development and management of energy efficiency projects on campus. So using that data that we have to determine where we should be putting money and working with off-campus consultants to develop those projects. So really all these roles in the day-to-day give me an opportunity to achieve 2 primary goals, and to reduce costs and reduce emissions on campus. And also I'm working with a variety of stakeholders. So from working with the Sustainability Institute to our project management team, and then other faculty, staff, working with them to help them make better decisions. So it really has a sort of a broad impact on campus. What sort of got me, why do I do, and what sort of got me into this? So I sort of grew up in the construction industry. So the building side of it has always been where I came from. And upon graduating, I worked for doing construction, so doing estimating and learning that side of the business. And then that's when I really was like, all right, I wanted to get back into the environmental side and make that impact and not just working for a private company. So that's when I went to work for Resilient Buildings Group, And I was doing energy efficiency consulting over there. So working with commercial businesses to understand different types of equipment that they can install, be more efficient, help them save money, sort of a win-win for everybody. And then I was contacted by our former energy manager on campus, who's now our director, sort of a full circle there, about the position I opened up here. And it seemed like a great opportunity to sort of apply all the skills that I had learned through school, through the fellowship, through my previous experiences, to have a increased impact, to be able to reduce emissions and help inform decisions here on campus.
And you are, and we so appreciate it. Yeah. One of the kind of threads I'm hearing here is just how broad like this can look, like kind of engineering and building science. It can look like stakeholder engagement. It can look like policy. It can look like reporting. Like there's so many pieces and parts of this, and all the pieces touch other pieces. But I love kind of hearing the entry point. And I can definitely testify to the fact that the work you do on campus is having an impact. So thank you for that. Andrea, I'll go to you next. How about talking to us about why you do what you do or how you got there?
Yeah, well, I won't go into like the, you already heard like the organizations I've worked for in the past, so I can kind of lean on the why do I get out of bed to do this? And a big part of it, I obviously is because I care about the earth and the continuance of human populations on earth. And also because I care about the natural environment. And I think that's probably the primary driver for me. But I think more on a day-to-day basis, like a lot of it is the people that I work with and what we've been able to accomplish together. I respect all of you, and I know you're starting out your careers, and so I'll be totally honest and say that there are days it's really hard. Like the more you learn about this, the more dire the problem seems and more insurmountable it seems. And I'm a person that's historically been very motivated by challenges. But I think when I see my peers in this field, like it's good peer pressure, I see my peers accomplishing these great things. I'm like, okay, Andrea, like you can do this too. You're like, I think about the wins I've had and how progress is possible. Like, when I was working in Indiana, so Indiana is a very conservative state, and the state government was, and I think is not doing anything to address climate change at all. And so this university, Indiana University, created a research institute to try to address that. And so I created this sort of arm of that research institute to really go out and work with communities and work with local governments across the state. And here in the state of like Indiana, which people often, I grew up there, people say, oh, I think I've flown over that state. I think I've driven through it. Like they know nothing about it, right? But we got 50 local governments covering 50% of the population of the state to do greenhouse gas inventories and to get started on climate action just in 3 years. And that was with support of students at Indiana University. So it's stuff like that saying, actually, we can come together and make really impressive things happen. And so that's what really motivates me and keeps me going, even though I'm continually inundated, I'm a social media user, I'm continually inundated by these terrible things happening across the world. But we can make progress. This bill came out, that's motivating. So yeah, I think that's the short answer I'll give you all.
Thank you so much. And now we can all refer back to that story when we need a little motivation. So thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah. If it can happen in Indiana, if Andrea can single-handedly create the thing that makes it happen over 3 years in Indiana, we can do what we need to do.
It's definitely possible. Yeah.
Thank you. David, how about you?
Yeah, I think that I am sort of at a different stage of my career than Andrea and Matt are. And so I guess I can provide a little bit more of the just out of college, just starting out in this field perspective. And that, initially it starts for me with the belief that anything, any education, any action, anything that we can put our time towards that addresses the climate crisis is worthwhile and worth doing and worth spending our work time on. And that was what got me interested in going into a field in sustainability in the first place. completing a major in school, and having that knowledge base to have that belief and go forward into the workforce with it. And then specifically in my job right now, I'd say that kind of playing into that is the flexibility. Has really been the fun part so far for me, and just the sort of the vast array of programs that we can get started with, that we're trying to get started with, because I'm the third full-time employee for the sustainability department at Unitil ever. And so this is a really new thing for the company. And that means that I get to take this kind of like maximalist approach to anything that comes across my desk, comes across my boss's desk. We can say like a preliminary yes to and get started with. So for example, one project that I've been excited about recently that I probably wasn't expecting to work on when I took the job was an inventory of our company-owned land for carbon sequestration benefits. And so that might be in the future, that might be justification to keep it forested, to improve forestry practices on it, keep it undeveloped. There just are, as the sort of consciousness in the company is growing, I think that there are more and more opportunities that are opening up, and that's exciting for me to continue to be a part of and to keep learning from, I would say.
I love that. That so resonates with me, even in a different, but like what has kept me in this all this time is like the ability to just, because we're just figuring it all out together as we go. So it's so creative and so big and so open. And that's the good news and the bad news. Yeah. So I'll give you first crack at this, Dave, but if anyone, if you need a minute, maybe someone else can step in too. So next question is a chance to just kind of open-ended, tell us something that you've learned in your journey, something that surprised you, either kind of favorably or unfavorably, opportunities or potential or challenges that you kind of didn't anticipate in getting into it.
Yeah. I definitely have been learning a lot. I think that one of the sort of the main challenges of working for a utility company is that the skilled labor is very on the ground. Like we have a lot of interaction with customers, with homeowners, businesses. We have hundreds of people every day out in the field doing maintenance on our infrastructure. And so the projects that we are implementing, for example, like in our fleet, trying to reduce idling through behavioral training, through new technology, transitioning vehicles to lower carbon alternatives, all of those have a pretty material and like direct impact on the people in the field. And so keeping all of the stakeholders across down the line in mind, I think is a real learning point for me. And remembering that if you have a routine and you're a line worker and you're out every day doing the same thing, a change to that routine is significant. And regardless of how good it is for emissions, that needs to be clearly justified and stated as we're putting stuff into action. So that's sort of a constant learning point for me. Been doing it for 6 months at this point, so there's still a lot more to learn.
So true, though. Yeah, I suspect you'll keep finding that true after many more 6 months. Matt, how about you? Surprises you can share with us?
I would say, as it relates to this role, is what surprised me was sort of my colleagues' willingness to sort of accept me being so early on in my career, when a lot of the people that I work with are further along in their career. It's sort of intimidating, right? Coming into an environment where you're the younger person, and especially having a construction background that was used to being treated very differently, right? So being in an environment where people are willing to take what you have to say to heart and sort of build on that and take your feedback, it encourages you to do more and to take on bigger tasks and to keep working towards it. So I guess I would encourage people to find those opportunities, and just because you're not necessarily in an opportunity like that doesn't mean it's not an opportunity to grow and still learn and take from that position. But definitely know what you know and be humble and keep moving forward.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you.
Right, so I'm gonna do a different spin and share some tidbits and facts that I've learned that also keep me motivated to continue on from before. One is that in the state of North Carolina, for every building, whether it be home or business or whatever, that we've removed from the floodplain, there have been 10 more buildings built in the floodplain within the same year. So lots of work to be done there. Some other things I've learned since, so I was in India and I moved to North Carolina recently, so this is on my mind, is that North Carolina has a town called Princeville, and it is the first, it claims to be the first town in the country to be founded by freed slaves. And the land that was given to them is very much so in a floodplain, and was in a floodplain when it was given to them. And so they are just constantly flooded over and over and over. And so I think, I like speaking with these residents, it's just like, this is a town in which has so much history and so much important history for our entire country. And yet the best solution is to move them elsewhere. So like, these challenges exist, but they don't want to move elsewhere, and so they're just trying to work with it, but they keep getting flooded over and over, and so like, there are just these challenges that just seem insurmountable out there. I think the other thing I've learned is that, and this is not to say anything bad about federal government employees, because like, there are plenty of our peers working in federal government that really care about addressing climate change, and they're trying to do that from the leverage of the federal government. But I think one of the things I've learned that they're struggling with is to really understand what's happening on the ground. And they're trying, right? But communication is a huge challenge. And so what I'm seeing in one particular area in North Carolina is that my office is working in, is that, like, so we're going down there and trying to help them do a vulnerability assessment and to develop and identify some key projects they can implement to be more resilient to climate change. Then I found out that turns out the EPA has also been going down there, and they've been interviewing these people. And then it turns out that like, there's this other agency in Department of the Economic Development, the EDA, the Economic Development Administration, has been going down there. They've been doing like, and talking to them. So like, there's all these, and I was even down there for an event we were holding, and my colleague ran into somebody in the elevator from another federal government department and said, "Oh, we're here to interview people and talk to them about how they're being impacted by climate change." So like, there's just like, and so then I happened to talk to some residents, and I was like, what can you tell me about this? Like, I feel like you're probably overwhelmed. And they said, yes, we are so tired of being interviewed and studied. We just like, we're done with that. And she's like, and what she told me was that she needed somebody to come in and just say, because like, these federal government agencies, they come in with their tools. They're like, okay, let's do a story circle, and let's do this and let's do that. And she's like, you know what, I just want somebody to come in and ask me about the tragedies that I experience over and over, and the compounding tragedies. And so, Jen, I thought about that when I heard that. I didn't realize you had a degree in addressing mental health. So it really speaks to like, the need for us to have not only know about sustainability and climate science, but also to have all these other skills that abut that can really help these communities. So that was a bit of an eye-opening for a moment for me recently. It's like, okay, maybe I should kind of brush up on how to talk to people about when they've had to overcome and deal with the tragedy in their life. Because that's what a hurricane is, when it takes away your home and you don't get one back for 4 or 5 years because it takes that long to get FEMA funding. That is a tragedy.
I so appreciate that story. And it reminds, so I'm going to send around a link to a New York Times story about that phenomenon. It might have been focused in Mississippi, I don't remember, but kind of talking about some of that too. And the other thing I'll send around to anybody who's interested is a link to, there's a coalition of groups called the International Transformational Resilience Coalition that has been working to make to kind of bring more trauma-informed care and practice into climate spaces and climate resilient spaces for exactly that reason. So some of you might find that interesting. I'm heartened by the intersection. And Andrea, you kind of anticipated, I think, or maybe answered the last question that I had in some ways, but if there's anything you want to add, do, which is sort of the magic wand question. Like if you could magically have a group of stakeholders that you work with understand or know something, change hearts or minds, what would be the first, heart or mind change you would make that you feel like would really make a difference? I guess another way of asking that is, what do you see as the kind of primary barrier in understanding that would be meaningful?
Yeah, I think for me, it's having communities understand that it is possible to address these issues long-term. So I'm seeing recently that like communities, especially in rural North Carolina, are in the eastern part of the state, are incredibly proud of their ability to do emergency response. Like I've heard them speak with so much pride, saying, "We didn't need the Red Cross. We were isolated because of the flooding and couldn't get anywhere, so we created our own emergency shelter and we dealt with it ourselves. And the Red Cross couldn't even get to us, and we were just fine." And I'm like, well, maybe it's possible for us to make it so that you're not isolated in the future. And so they're just, so it's hard to get, like, when you talk to them about resilience, they immediately say, oh, we know about, there's this general, resilience is a really hard term, by the way, to talk about, because it means so many things. And to them, it means something very specific. And to me, it means sort of long-term, preparedness for these big issues. And so I think that's the one thing I wish that I could just turn a light bulb on for them and say, no, it is possible. And that kind of goes along with the fact that it's really hard. Another thing I've learned is that our communities and our consultants have gotten really good at doing vulnerability assessments. But in terms of prioritizing projects and actually implementing projects, that's where our field is struggling right now. So to jump to the next questions that Jen sent us in advance, I'll say, as some advice, I would say, brush up on actual projects and solutions and use those as your talking points when you're trying to get jobs. Because the more we can really talk about solutions like that, I think will really help us prepare for the impacts of climate change, which regardless of this bill, our climate impacts are not going to be as bad, as long as everything works out with this bill. But, we're still going to be hit pretty hard in the coming decades.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. David, how about you? Thoughts about what you would change?
Yeah, I think that utilities are in an interesting position in regards to climate change, because they have this sort of long-term and kind of supported belief that there's not a whole lot of need to change. I mean, power is such a consistent and sort of inelastic need for people. I mean, we need electricity, we need to heat our homes. And utilities have always provided that service and will provide that service going forward. And so if I had my magic wand, I would probably shift that perception to be much more inclusive of the realities of climate change on the electric grid, on our infrastructure, on the increased demand that we're going to see. There are so many vulnerabilities in our system that will affect that kind of stable business as usual, just keep your head down and keep pushing kind of attitude that exists in the sort of utility sector. And also that sustainability is not going away, that this isn't like a 5-year kind of plan, we meet our carbon target in 2030 and then it's over. That this is a new and important piece of how we plan for the next century of the business. And so I think, that's part of what I'm trying to do, is create more buy-in and more understanding that the information and the capabilities that people have within the company are actually really valuable, and we will need those. If we're trying to address climate change, and that it's not going to be it's not going to be business as usual, even for such a stable industry like the utilities. So yeah, a lot of just culture change, I think, would be my main wave of the magic wand.
Again, that's the good news and the bad news. It's the hearts and minds, not the technology. Yeah. Matt, how about you? Thoughts from a campus perspective?
If I could change one group's mind, I would say it would be finance people. And I'll preface that by saying that, like, at UNH, we're really fortunate. We are one of the top sustainable universities in the country, so we do have some support behind that, but kind of comes from two different levels. It's just more broadly, like Jen and I have had conversations about implementing carbon pricing into our projects and making decisions based on that on a broad level. But then even on day to day, like, we have new construction projects ranging from very big to very small happening around campus, coming up almost every day. And sometimes people are so quick to come up with a solution that they don't necessarily come up with the best solution or the best long-term solution. And it ends up being, well, we could have spent a little bit more money and made a more efficient solution during that project, but instead I'm going to have to come back in 3 years and develop an energy efficiency project that's going to take more time and take more money. And so if people understood sort of from the finance side that it is in our best long-term interest to invest in these things today, and it'll pay dividends in the future, I think that would help push us along.
Some long-term thinking. That would be a great shift. Yeah. Okay, this is where I stop asking questions and open it up to you all to ask questions. Feel free to do the raise your hand thing in the Zoom or put them in the chat. Who would like to ask or share? Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And this question, Andrea, you started to hit on it, but I guess with my work for a municipality, I'm seeing the director of sustainability that I'm under, like, have so many tasks to think about doing for a climate action plan. So I guess I'm wondering, like, how do you prioritize certain projects, and like, how do you organize that for, you know, just for you mentally, logistically? How do you prioritize work? Are there systems you have in place? Is it based on like the most, you know, need? Yeah, thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot because I've struggled with it since my first job after leaving Portsmouth for that summer position. So I think my sort of mantra for this is on my plate to always have a couple of projects that are quick wins to keep my motivation up and the community's motivation up. And then to also have a project on my plate that's long-term and a big impact, because those quick wins are typically not big impact. Like, I want to, so that's what I try to do. You know, as you're entering your careers right out of college or grad school, it's you're not going to be the boss right away. And so it's, you know, there's some managing up that has to be done in a very respectful way. I think we talked a little bit about this on our last advisory call. But, you know, there's also, like, so, you know, some of it is taking advantage of opportunities when they pop up. Like, always make sure to leave some space. Don't make your schedule so full, mostly for your sanity, but also because opportunities pop up that you have to jump on that allow you to, like, that it just seems like the right time for that. And so make sure to leave time for those projects too.
Which, again, I'm channeling the podcast I was listening to earlier, which means saying no to things that might still be valuable. It always means practicing the no muscle, which is hard and valuable. Rafida.
Hi, thank you, Jen, and hi, Andrea. So my question is for you. So basically, climate change and environmental issues are not the easiest to communicate about, and that's something that you have been saying in this meeting as well. And I was wondering, like, every time I go out and I have to tell people, you know, what I'm studying, I have to give an effort to explain to them, like, what I'm studying, like, why am I studying sustainability, and environmental studies and stuff like that. I feel like there's still a lot of gap in communication about issues as such. And yes, there's a lot of things in Google about how to, like, top tips, how to communicate about climate change and sustainability issues, but it's always nice to hear and more, what should I say? It's more engaging to hear from people who actually work in it, especially in the root level. So that's why what I wanted to ask, that what do you think are some of the top tips, or you think effective strategies about communicating about these issues?
Yeah, for me, I think it's more about listening than it is about talking. And so that's a hard change to make, and it has been for me, and I still struggle with it from time to time, because I always want to like correct people, say, no, like this is what's happening, look at these charts, look at, but I have to stop myself and instead teach people through asking them questions and making them consider what's going on in the world, and kind of guiding them through like why these issues matter. And listening to them to try to find like, well, what is it that's important to them that's going to really bring them in to caring about this issue. And also sometimes it's about giving up if there's somebody that's just going to build a wall, because you can spend your time way more effectively talking to somebody else. I know that sounds really jaded, but it's true that there are people out there that are like that, and hopefully they'll come around eventually, but it doesn't have to be me that convinces them. But it's also true that like the more that, I mean, if you hear this from the communication professionals, the more we just talk about it generally, the more it becomes an issue that rises to the top for people politically, especially. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Nobody has the silver bullet for this, although I do hate that expression. I just used it.
Just see if Matt or David have anything to add on that front, this kind of question of communication. No, it's okay.
Yeah, I was reading something from, I can't remember her name, but basically they were saying that if you talk about sort of these broader climate change issues in a way that connects with people, and you kind of start it off with finding out what's important to people and then relating that back to climate change and how that will be impacted, that's sort of one way to connect with people and get them thinking about the topic, instead of coming at them from a perspective where they historically might have pushed against or fought. It's just more confrontational that way. So just trying to connect with people and understand what's important to them.
Yeah, I guess I will also just say it's difficult for those of us who are just coming out of academic settings where discussing environmentalism is the easiest thing in the world, because everyone's on the same page, everyone's reading the same things. Everyone is generally of the same mind about what action should be taken. I certainly don't feel like I am a master communicator about climate change and about why it's relevant for the people in my company. And I have a lot of learning to do in that regard, and I know that all of us who are getting started in our careers will also do that learning too. So I don't feel like a sage on this yet. It's a great question though.
Me either. I don't know if any of us does. It depends on the day. We have time for one more question, I think, maybe two. Folks have any? Did I mention I trained as a therapist? I can let it be quiet for a while. Okay, well, I'm putting this link to that coalition I mentioned. Oops, sorry, I just did that right to you, Josh, and not to everybody. Try it again. I'm putting that link that I mentioned earlier in the chat. I'm going to let our panelists have the last word with any other kind of advice or invitations you might have for the fellows this summer as they wrap up their projects and move on to their next either academic or professional positions. Words of wisdom or encouragement. And I don't know, David, looks like you're highlighted on my screen. So do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. Words of wisdom. I think, I don't know. I hope that all of you are aware of how valuable your projects are to the people you're working for. I know that it was, I was lucky to have mentors that were very clear about how my work would be used and what it was, what niche it was filling at the company. But I think that, I think that these are just really valuable projects, and I hope that all of you are proud of what you're doing and that you are getting that same feedback from your mentors. It's a very nice thing to hear that you've had a substantial impact on a specific measurable material project, and that was the value of this fellowship for me when I did it, and hope it's the value for you too.
And to build on that, that's a really great point, David. I just want to thank you all for doing this work and being so committed to it, that you're dedicating your summer and your education to this work. It's so important. And I think in terms of advice, I would say build your network, both for your mental health and for your job prospects in the future. I mean, I think it's especially important in this age of COVID, when so much is virtual, that we really have to step out of our comfort zones and call people on the phone and connect with them. Because with those day-to-day interactions in person are just not happening. And that's how I used to build my network, is showing up at events and talking to people. So I definitely encourage you to step out of your comfort zone at least once every day and try to make a connection with someone.
And I would say to appreciate all your experiences and try to learn something from it. So obviously coming right out of school, you don't really know what you want to do, and you want to find something that's impactful. And coming out of my fellowship, I didn't have that experience right away and something that I thought was impactful, but you still got to find a way to learn something from it, find something that's meaningful from it, and take that forward. And if you do that, other people will notice you. Other people will see that you put effort forward, and you'll find what is truly meaningful to you.
I'm just sitting here reflecting that our three panelists embody the advice that the very good advice that they just shared, or perspective that they just shared. And I am grateful to you three for that, for all the connecting that you have done with this network and beyond, and that you keep doing. I'm very grateful for all the kind of appreciation and openness that you've expressed and shared. And I just want to say thank you to each of you in the same way that and echo the thanks to the fellows. I hope that each of you will reach out to Matt, David, and Andrea, and I hope you all don't mind being inundated with folks reaching out to you. This sort of notion of the thing that keeps us going, one thing that keeps us going is small successes and the people around us. If we are only doing it for the big success, for the ultimate end goal, it will be really hard to sustain ourselves. But if we sustain ourselves in our community and in kind of appreciating and savoring the small lessons and victories, shall we say, I think we can be where we want to be at any given moment, never mind getting where we want to go. So thank you again very much, all of you. I hope you have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you all very soon.
Thanks again. It was really great to talk with you all today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.